Welcome to the next phase of the 2020-2021 school year webinar. This is Jennifer Maddox, Public Information Officer of San Jose Unified. With me today are Superintendent Nancy Algaron, Deputy Superintendent Stephen McMahon, Associate Superintendent Jody Lack, and Assistant Superintendent Dominic Bejarano. Today's session will be recorded and available for replay following the event. We will be responding to questions submitted prior to the session throughout the presentation. This format is different than in previous sessions, as we wanted to ensure all families had an opportunity to ask questions, even if they're unable to attend the live session. At the end, we will be sharing information on how to submit any additional questions you may have. And I will now turn the session over to Superintendent Nancy Algaron.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time from your busy day to be with us today. We greatly appreciate it, and we hope that by the end of today's session, you have insight into what some of the additional next steps are going to be as we prepare for this next phase of returning students to in-person instruction. So today, we're going to be following a very simple format. We're going to start by discussing where we have been, where we are now currently, where we are going, and how we will get there together. So we will also be weaving in questions throughout the presentation. We hope that it will answer some of those many questions that were submitted. The content for today was built based on those questions and what we have answers to now, but you have our commitment that we will continue to send out information in the next couple of weeks as we get ready for that January date. So let me begin by acknowledging that we've never faced conditions like the ones we face today. We have tried to be extremely thoughtful and intentional with every decision, but also recognizing the impact of those decisions and that everyone's needs are unique. There's no perfect solution to this complex problem. The senior team is here today. Our public information officer is here today. We all have children. We all have children that are in distance learning, and so we absolutely empathize with the challenge of this situation. But please know that we are committed to returning students to in-person instruction when we can do so. So again, we are committed to continuing to bring them, to work toward bringing them back while maintaining the appropriate safety protocols and in order to mitigate risk. So just very quickly, let me recap where we have been over the last 6 months. In June, we convened a reopening task force that consisted of our labor group leaders, teacher representatives, other support staff, administrators, and our parent leaders. The task force had a very challenging task of reviewing research and different models, not just international models, but models that are being deployed across the country. And the task force landed on a model they felt would best serve our students while operating within the constraints of local conditions. Again, acknowledging there's not a perfect model. Every model had some strengths and constraints, and we felt that the model that was selected was most responsive to what our community had indicated that they needed, and would allow us to move from one setting to the next based on the changing conditions. In July, we made the extremely difficult decision to begin the school year with full distance learning for all students. In this next slide, you will see the model that the reopening task force recommended. It allows us flexibility with live instruction. And so what this model does is it allows us to be in school, in classrooms with teachers, or fully at home in distance learning if the health order requires that to be the case. The key element of this model is that it allows flexibility for students to be in one environment and for their families to make that determination based on what's most appropriate for them. In a situation where public health would close a school, we would be able to move from one setting to the other without a lot of lost instructional time. This next image shows our model more specifically. You see live instruction happening in a classroom with a small group of students. the technology that is being leveraged through our cameras and our computer or laptops, our WebEx system. Students that are participating at home can do so based on what families select for their child. Currently, because of the health conditions, we are all in distance learning. All the students are at home. The majority of our staff members, our teachers, are in their classrooms, streaming their lessons to students. I want to take a couple of minutes to just review the highlights of why the Reopening Task Force recommended this model. I think most importantly, it provided synchronous instruction with a teacher for the entire day for all of our students. We heard loud and clear that the challenge of asynchronous instruction for families was something that was not working, and so we wanted a model that allowed for students to be engaged with their teacher for the entire school day. We also selected this model because it allowed staff and students to maintain the connection to their school community, since large numbers of teachers and students would possibly have to be reassigned to other classrooms or other school sites under different models that were being considered. If, for example, we had a virtual-only setting, only teachers would be moved to that setting. Students that only wanted virtual instruction would be moved to that setting, and it would not be the same person that they started the instructional year with. It would be a lot of movement of individuals, and that was not something that the task force felt was in the best interest of our students, our families, and our employees. This is not a hybrid model where some students come in the morning and some students come in the afternoon. It is a model that provides live synchronous instruction, whether it be when students are all at home or a group of them are at school and some are at home, based on the decision of the family. So just really quickly to show some of the data that we looked at, in July, the COVID-19 cases in Santa Clara County were on a steep upward trend, and that's why we made the difficult decision to open the year in full distance learning. So at that time, we announced that we would be in full distance learning for the first 6 weeks of school, because we heard loud and clear through surveys and feedback that we received from our community that consistency and continuity was important, that we not be moving from one environment to the other. It might be chaotic, and so we committed to that decision for the first 6 weeks while monitoring the data and evaluating the best path forward. So that brings us now then to the data in September. We continued to monitor the data, and you can see here that the case counts were beginning to show improvements from what we saw in July, but they still were much higher than we closed schools in March. This was also a really difficult decision, because we knew that there was a desire from our students, our staff, our families to have some students back in person. However, we had a responsibility as a community to do what we could to stop the spread of the virus, and so we remained in distance learning for the remainder of the semester. So right now, we're currently in distance learning, and the goal is to remain in distance learning through December to provide that consistency for our students and our staff as they continue to engage with the distance learning programs, and our teachers continue to refine their practices using distance learning approaches. So that now takes us to where we are now, and I'm going to be turning it over to our Deputy Superintendent, Stephen McMahon.
So we want to spend a little bit of time talking about our current situation, which, is, the superintendent mentioned, is all distance learning. We made a commitment for August 12th, and while we were during the distance learning experience, to maximize our connection rate, to make sure we worked really hard to get our students connected to their peers, to get connected to their teachers, and do everything we possibly could to build those relationships and those connections. We do see in the data that worked. Our staff, our teachers deserve a tremendous amount of credit for working so hard to get students online. For the last complete school year, so the last year data is available from the state, we had a 9.8% chronic absenteeism rate. That's down to 6.6% now. So chronic absenteeism is defined by students missing 10% or more of the available school days. We're having better attendance now than we did for the last complete school year. So that just shows how hard everyone has worked, teachers, staff, family members. This has been an incredibly challenging experience, but we've got our students connected. We want to emphasize, though, we know our students need more. While distance learning is working, we need to do a lot more for our students, which is why we're working so hard to get our students back on campus as soon as we possibly can. Distance learning has been successful, but it's not what our students need. And we're going to go through this meeting talking about how we can hopefully get our students back on campus in January. Another highlight is our safety protocol. We have almost 3,000 employees working here in San Jose Unified. Most of them are back at their workplaces. Since July, we've had a face covering requirement, physical distancing, symptom screening, cleaning protocols, testing and tracing. The protocols have been extremely effective. We have had employees test positive for COVID-19. Thankfully, there's been no spread of the virus at the workplace. So all of the positive tests have come, the virus came from outside the workplace and it did not spread within San Jose Unified at all. So that just shows our safety protocols have been working. Our staff has done an amazing job being diligent and thoughtful and doing what they need to do to distance, to wear their masks, to keep washing their hands. So we thankfully have this success to build on as we work towards welcoming students back in January. We've also been really fortunate to have a collaborative experience internally, externally, working with our labor groups, the County Office of Education, other school districts, County Department of Public Health, our state agencies. We're all learning about the virus and the best way to respond. Everyone in our community knows how fast the information changes. We have to work together to digest that information and find out how we can most appropriately respond. We continue to do that. The challenges are not any easier when you collaborate, but the outcomes are definitely better. So as we work together and we collaborate with each other, we get stronger outcomes. We just wanted to take a few minutes to let you know we've had success with distance learning, we've had success with our safety protocols, and our collaborative approach has been fruitful. All of those will continue as we plan for next school year. We need to work now to be ready for the next phase. So January is still a couple months away, but to welcome students back onto campus, we need to work constantly. So we are working towards getting students back on campus in January, fully acknowledging that we can't predict the health conditions in January. So you'll hear in this presentation that depending on the health conditions, we may need to have students fully at home, we may have students fully at school, or a combination of those. Some parents may want to keep their students at home. We're working on providing the option to all families, but we need to acknowledge that health conditions may mean everyone needs to stay at home because the virus is spreading in a way that's detrimental to bringing students back on campus. So you'll hear in the presentation that we've got a plan, we're working hard. The target date for the next phase is January. And with the background of what we're doing now, I'll turn it back to the superintendent for where we're going next.
So as many of you are aware, California has adopted a new blueprint system to monitor the virus risk level for each of the counties in California. And I'm happy to report that Santa Clara County continues to make progress in slowing the transmission of COVID-19. We recently moved to the orange tier, which designates a moderate spread. And that is positive news. If we continue to remain in the orange tier, we are planning to open schools and return students to in-person instruction on January 5th. And I want to repeat that. If we remain in the orange tier or better, which yellow is the better tier, we are planning to return some students for in-person instruction starting January 5th. If for some reason on December 30th, when the dashboard is last updated prior to that January 5th date, if we slide into the red or purple tiers, which means that there are more cases and we're trending in the wrong direction, we will postpone in-person instruction until our county returns to the orange tier. So our staff are currently in their classrooms, the majority of them working on distance learning. On January 4th, teachers will report back to their classroom, with students then returning on January 5th, whose families have selected that in-person instruction. Students will not be required to return in person if their family chooses distance learning. The state has modified the education code for this year and allows families that option to remain in distance learning if they choose. So the positive part of that is that we will not have to make significant changes because we will continue with our live instruction model. Our teachers will be in their classrooms with a smaller group of students. We will be leveraging the technology and the applications that we have to live stream the same lesson to the students enrolled in that class who are accessing the lesson from home. So this model lends itself to bringing students back fairly seamlessly, but I do want to manage expectations about what that instruction will look like in the classroom. Because of the physical distancing requirements, the mask wearing, and a variety of other factors, we must continue to maintain distance between the teacher and the students, and so it will look a lot like it does now. However, there will be students in classrooms accessing that instruction and being among their peers, being with their peers during that day for the full day. So we are continuing to keep the same number of instructional minutes.
Great, thanks, Nancy. And with that, we will go to our first round of questions. I'll be asking questions of the panel and giving them an opportunity to respond, and we'll do this throughout the presentation several times. The first question, Nancy, is for you. Can parents opt to keep their students in distance learning if they do not want them to return in person? Can they pick only specific days of the week to attend?
So again, parents will definitely have the opportunity to engage in the selection process, either for an in-person seat or to remain in distance learning. The education code allows for that. The selection will apply for the remainder of the year, or as long as we have to have limitations on the students in the classroom that are 6 feet apart. But students, if they choose an in-person option, need to come to school the 5 days a week. We won't be able to have some students coming, on different days. The goal is to maintain that consistency and to have students that are coming in person to be in person, and those that are going to be in distance learning to remain in distance learning those 5 days a week.
Thank you. Next question, Stephen, we'll go back to you. I know you touched on this already. This question has come up a lot, though. COVID-19 cases in our county are on the rise. Given the constant fluctuation, will you continue to make school reopening choices on up-to-the-minute data?
So we are doing our best to make sure we can give some predictability to our decisions and not make decisions with such short notice that families can't adjust. So as the superintendent mentioned, we went to distance learning. We gave some lead time for that notice. When we extended it to December, we gave some lead time. That's the case in this situation. We're planning to return students on campus in January, but it is dependent on the California Blueprint for a Safer Economy. Santa Clara County is currently in the orange tier. If we stay in the orange tier or move to the yellow tier, we'll move forward with in-person learning experiences in January. If the data around us gets worse, meaning we slide backwards to the red or purple tiers, we'll wait. And we'll use the state's framework as of December 30th to make the decision for January 5th. So the community can go to the California Blueprint for a Safer Economy, find the status for Santa Clara County. If we're orange or yellow, we're moving forward with an in-person option. If we slide back to red or purple, we'll be putting that on hold. So hopefully that helps the community be able to track with us when we'll be able to do this, and it also acknowledges we need to be cognizant of the public health data around us as we work to get our students back on campus.
Thank you. Now, next question, Jody, will be for you. Will teachers be instructing students online and in person at the same time? Is it possible to add more asynchronous options for distance learners?
So the live instructional model is the only way that we can fulfill the state requirements for instructional minutes and provide students with synchronous instruction throughout the school day. This was the model that we looked at with the task force and realized that it was the best one for supporting our students. The instruction for both students in person and students participating from home will be different than it has been traditionally, because teachers will be managing a class with students in different locations. And it will be adjusted, an adjustment for the teacher and for the students. Our classrooms all have a camera designed to follow the speaker, so classmates at home will be able to see their classmates that are in person, and will be able to see the teacher as they move around the classroom, and the students will continue to use their devices when they are in person. We're not looking to add asynchronous options because it creates significantly more paperwork and tracking for teachers, which takes away the time they need to plan for instruction. The state requires all minutes spent on independent work to be logged by students by day, so we will continue to provide professional development and support for our staff to improve teaching and learning this year as we move to in-person instruction.
Thank you, Jody. And last question for this section, we'll go back to you, Jody. Will there be traditional in-person teaching that takes place off the screen?
That is a great question. I think Superintendent Albrand already mentioned this, but I want to really reiterate that when our students are in person, they will still be required to maintain that 6-foot distancing. So it will not be exactly the same as it has been in the past. But students that are in person will not have to join the class WebEx, so they will be able to view the teacher offline. But assignments will still be given through Canvas for all the students. So students in person will still be using their laptop or their Chromebook or their iPad in order to submit those assignments. Remember that people on campus are required to maintain 6-foot social distancing. So our teachers will not be able to interact closely with students as they traditionally have. But we are going to continue to support our teachers so that they can provide our best instruction in both settings.
Thank you, Jody. And now we will go back to the presentation, and Jody, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, so we are using the Santa Clara County Public Health Guidance for Reopening Schools as the framework for all of our plans. And as Deputy Superintendent McMahon stated earlier, we have a lot of these pieces in place and have since school started in August. All staff and visitors are currently required to wear face coverings on campus. Building on this safety protocol, as we prepare for the return of students to in-person instruction, we are updating our current COVID-19 safety protocols to mitigate risk of exposure with students on campus. Face coverings will be required for all in-person students and employees at all times during the school day, except when eating or drinking or during intense physical outdoor activities. Students will be required to adhere to the face covering protocol and will not be allowed to remain on campus if they do not comply. Additionally, all students and staff must remain 6 feet apart at all times during the school day. Our classrooms will be modified to ensure desks are spaced 6 feet apart and students and staff can maintain that 6-foot distance at all times. The movement of students on campus during the school day will also be modified to ensure students and staff can maintain physical distancing. And remember that the main safety protocol for students in secondary schools is face covering and 6-foot physical distancing.
Thank you. And this section has generated a lot of questions from the community, so we'll pause here and take another round of questions. Jody, the first question will be for you related to masks. Will the district require students to wear masks? And what happens if a student refuses to wear a mask?
So we are requiring students to wear a face covering covering their nose and their mouth. We will provide training to be very explicit about what we expect. Students that do not comply with this requirement will be subject to the existing discipline policy.
Okay, thank you. And next question, Jody, is back to you. Will the physical distancing protocol be followed in classrooms? How many students can be in a classroom?
The physical distancing protocol is required at all times on campus, so that includes the classroom. Our classrooms that cannot fit the full roster of students with 6-foot distancing will be capped according to the available space in the room.
Great, thank you. And then finally, this question has come up more and more, especially for our middle and high school students. What will in-person PE look like? Will distance learners still be participating?
So we are working through the specifics of courses such as physical education, band, choir, and drama in order to determine the best way to conduct those courses with some students in person and some at home. We know that there are parameters that require us to think about these differently, and so we will be sharing more details in the next few weeks.
Okay, thank you. And Stephen, with that, we'll turn it back to you.
So one of the most important protocols we've implemented is training and screening. We've had this in place for months. So I mentioned earlier, our employees have been back at work, many of them in person. They're required to take a safety training before coming back to in-person experiences. And then we have a daily symptom screen. The symptom screen is built off the questionnaire that County Public Health has developed to look for COVID-19 symptoms. So some of the symptoms are actually not COVID-19, but allows us to send someone home and request that they get a COVID-19 test. So because we've had this training and screening in for so many months, we have a lot of experience with the tool and how to use it, gives us confidence that we can expand this to students. Anyone who comes onto a San Jose Unified campus now needs to take the screen. An employee, a visitor, someone performing work, they all take the screen before they come to the workplace. When students are able to come back on campus, they'll be needing to do that as well. So all students will have to complete a symptom screen. If they have symptoms that could be COVID-19, they'll need to stay home till we can do an assessment and determine whether it's safe for them to be on campus. We also have a testing and tracing system that has been in place since July. I did mention earlier that we have had positive cases among our employees. No employee has spread the virus at the workplace. All of the COVID-19 positives came from a source outside San Jose Unified. What we do is make sure we follow up with any close contacts. We notify the workplace environment of the exposure risk, tell them to monitor for symptoms. And there's a couple different groups, whether you're a close contact or whether you may have been exposed by the workplace, you get different advice. Our nurses have done a great job anytime there's been a positive result, notifying people who may be at risk and following up with the close contacts. Public health is also a partner in this. While San Jose Unified is responsible for the workplace, we let public health know of anyone who tests positive, and they follow up with those individuals and their possible close contacts outside of San Jose Unified. So we have a strong testing and tracing system already in place. We are confident we can expand that to support our students when they come back to campus.
Okay, thank you. And Dominic, we have not given you an opportunity to say anything yet, so we'll give the first question in this round to you. What is the plan for testing employees?
So Santa Clara County issued an order to local health providers to provide COVID tests for essential workers, no matter what symptoms they have. And this includes our school staff. Employees can be tested through their healthcare provider or at one of Santa Clara County testing sites. We are working with Santa Clara County Office of Education and multiple districts in the county to expand testing to make it more convenient for staff. All staff that come in contact with students will be required to be tested on a regular basis. And we are finalizing the details soon.
Great, thank you. And next question, Dominic, will go back to you, also related to testing. Will the students that return in person be tested on a regular basis?
So currently, we do not believe we are able to require in-person students to be tested on a regular basis. We will continue to work with local and state agencies to clarify what we can require for student testing. Students are required to be tested if they have one or more symptoms or one of their household or close contacts have tested positive.
Great, thank you. And Stephen, you talked earlier about the tracing and testing that has been going on to date. Can you talk a little bit more specifically about how contact tracing will be implemented in the plan once students return to campus?
Yes, as I mentioned, for the workplace environment, we follow up with any close contacts related to work and relay the name to the Santa Clara County Department of Public Health, who follows up with that individual outside the workplace environment. So it's a good partnership. We have the names and information. Public Health follows up on the outside. We do notification here at the workplace. That logic has been expanded in guidance from the Public Health Department to all school districts in the county. So there's a set of scenarios that they've outlined, the actions to take, who receives the communication, and the process for doing that. So we'll show a couple quick examples. It might be hard to read these, but you can go to the County Public Health Department website and download the guide for reopening schools. And towards the back, it lists all of the scenarios, actions, and communications to take regarding COVID-19 and possible exposures. I'll just run through some highlights. If a student or staff member has symptoms, such as a fever, they would be sent home, told to get a test. We'd monitor them, wait for the test results. That classroom would remain open, and we would not send a communication. So that's only if there's a symptom. Rationale behind that is students will have symptoms for lots of reasons, colds, flus. What we need to do is isolate them and determine what is their status, and then go from there. If there's a family member or close contact who tests positive, the parent of a student, the student would be sent home, again told to monitor for symptoms. They would have to quarantine. The classroom would remain open, but we would notify that cohort grouping. So if an individual student was exposed but not positive, we would notify that student's group of the possible exposure and encourage them to monitor for symptoms as well. The third scenario is if you have a positive test, either by an employee or a student, that individual has to go home, isolate for at least 10 days after symptoms. The symptoms have to resolve themselves and improve before they can return. Because it's now a positive test, we're going to notify the Public Health Department, who's going to follow up with all their close contacts outside the school setting. We're going to have everyone in that group get tested, sent home, and we would notify the entire school community that there was a positive test at the campus. So again, these are scenarios that were developed by the Public Health Department. They're the recommendations for all Santa Clara County public schools. They're the ones we'll follow when we have students on campus. They're very similar to what we've been doing with employees for months. We work with the San Jose Unified environment and partner with public health to work with the environment beyond that. But if you're interested in reading all the details and how San Jose Unified will implement them, they are in the reopening guideline, which you can get on the public health website.
Great, thank you for that. And last question that we have on tracing, Nancy, will be for you. Who will be responsible for contact tracing?
So as Deputy Superintendent McMahon shared, this is a partnership with public health. The school district is responsible for what the county is calling close contact identification at the school site or work location. And what that means is that staff here have to engage in interviews of individuals, gathering of information, contact information for all of the individuals that they came into contact with, and then in a very short period of time, sharing that information with public health, who would then begin the process of contacting individuals that they came into contact with outside of the school site. So again, the school district is responsible for a piece of it through contact identification. public health communicates with those outside of the school setting. You know, it's a huge endeavor, and it's something that we are following the guidance of the public health department to have that information. But each site also has a person that will be responsible for communicating any of those COVID-19 exposures and positive cases to our school district designee, who is our manager of health services, Katie Rodriguez, and she is in constant communication with public health to provide the information for them.
Great, thank you. And with that, I will turn it back over to Stephen.
Thank you. We've also changed our cleaning and disinfecting protocols since the pandemic started. The focus is on high-touch surfaces and high-traffic areas. Under normal times, we'd spend a lot of time vacuuming. We have 3.3 million interior square feet. It's a lot of floors to keep clean. That custodial team is now focused on doing less of that type of cleaning and really making sure that any space shared by individuals from multiple households gets cleaned every day. High-touch surfaces get cleaned and disinfected multiple times a day, and common areas like restrooms or eating areas get disinfected multiple times as well. So we've retrained our staff, we've refocused them. They're very conscientious in making sure that any environment where we need to pay extra attention to keep people safe from the pandemic, it gets the extra attention. Other custodial activities that we would normally do are not done with the same frequency right now because they're just not the priority. So the priority is on high-touch surfaces and high-traffic areas. As we bring students back onto campus, we'll have that same logic. Any common area shared by multiple people from different households gets extra attention. Any surfaces that are high-touch by multiple people get extra attention. Another area that we've overhauled and changed substantially is our ventilation systems. So HVAC is our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. They've all been adjusted to maximize outside air. We're replacing all of the filters with MERV 13 filters. We want to make sure that we have is high efficiency airflow. So filtration is important, but the most important thing is moving the air. So all of our HVAC systems are designed to circulate the air in the interior space per state guidelines. They've been doing that since they were installed. So whether they're heating or cooling, they're always ventilating. If they're on, ventilation is occurring. The difference in this world is making sure that that ventilation is with as much outside air as possible. I know there's a question coming up about this later, so I'll go into more detail, but that's a big change. It's not as cost effective to bring in outside air. On a really cold day, the machine has to work harder to heat the air as it pulls in the maximum quantity of outside air. But that's what we've done. It fits with the health guidelines. One of the most important things you can do in interior space is have air circulation. Heating it and cooling it is less important than the air moving. So the V and HVAC is what we're focused on, and making sure that the ventilation is with as much outside air as possible.
Great, thank you. First question that we have in this section, Stephen, will be for you. Does San Jose Unified have the necessary budget to meet all the requirements for schools to reopen for in-person instruction?
Yes. And it wouldn't be me if I didn't elaborate. So there's two truths. One is we do not have the financial resources to do everything we should for our employees and our students. The cost of living in this area, the services we desire to provide. What we had to do in response to the pandemic is turn many things off to make sure we could reprioritize our available funds to the necessary safety protocols for the pandemic. So there are many things that would have happened a year ago that are no longer happening. Vacuuming, the HVAC, field trips, camps, things that would have been activities associated with the school day have been turned off. Turning those off has allowed us to reposition the funds to changes we need to respond to the pandemic. So when the question is, do we have the budget for these COVID-19 requirements? Yes. We have the PPE, we bought the air filters, we've upgraded our technology infrastructure. We don't have new money to do those things. We repurposed the money we had. So old things are off, responses to the pandemic are on, but we're in a good financial position to make sure we have the supplies and the resources we need for in-person instruction.
Great, thank you. And next question for you, which you kind of stole my thunder on. You're not supposed to foreshadow the questions when you're responding. How are you ensuring adequate airflow in the classrooms?
So again, our HVAC systems do three things. Not all of our spaces have air conditioning. Our largest spaces have heating and ventilation only. So gymnasiums have heating and ventilation without air conditioning. Almost all other spaces have both heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. The V part is really important. So our systems are designed to move the air in all interior spaces per the state requirements. What we've done to make it healthier and safer is make sure as it ventilates the room, it's drawing as much outside air in as possible. So if you walk into one of our classrooms, you'll see an exhaust duct where the air is coming in, and then an intake duct that is sucking the air out of the classroom. They work together. In between taking the air out of the classroom and putting the new air in is now the maximum amount of outside air possible. So again, it's a little less efficient. It's harder to cool a hot room when you draw in the outside hot air, but it's safer in response to COVID-19 to have that outside air. So the ventilation part is the most important piece right now. In addition, opening windows is fine, opening doors is fine. The goal is to circulate as much outside air as possible.
Thank you, Stephen. And Jody, we'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, so staff have already been given face coverings, hand sanitizer, and disinfecting supplies for their assigned workspace. We are in the process of ordering plexiglass physical barriers for adults in classrooms and front office spaces that are specifically designed to protect staff. Additional PPE, including face shields and gloves, will be provided to employees based on their job, their required job duties, and state and level requirements. Each site has formed or is in the process of forming a safety team that will include an administrator, certificated, and classified employees. The safety team will be responsible for implementing the district safety protocols at the work location. This team will work to ensure the protocol is implemented correctly and that staff and students are in compliance with the safety protocol. The team will also work on communication with stakeholders so that everyone understands what is happening and what those expectations are.
Great, thank you, Jody. We'll take some more questions. Before we do that, you mentioned something that I want to be sure our audience knows what you meant when you said it will include certificated and classified employees. What does that mean?
So our certificated employees are teachers, counselors, nurses, and then the classified employees are generally the secretary, the campus supervisor, instructional associates. It's important to include a variety of staff members on the committee to make sure that we're bringing in different perspectives as we're thinking about the implementation of the protocols at the site level.
Perfect, thank you for clarifying that. And first question, Jody, will be back to you. Will Jody, this one is not your question, this one is Stephen's. Will plastic desk shields be provided for each student?
So we're really going to emphasize the 6-foot distancing rule as opposed to barriers at each workstation. We're going to focus on 6 feet of distance at all times. Jody mentioned earlier barriers in interior spaces. Those will be for adults. So we'll make sure all of our adult employees have a way to distance themselves from their students, and we'll distance the students from each other by moving the desks and spacing furniture 6 feet apart. Going in that direction fits with the guidelines from public health that we want to make sure that adults are as protected as possible from the students. The science has indicated that students are at much less risk, both individually and moving the disease among each other. So our focus is on distancing for everyone and physical barriers for adults.
Great, thank you. And Jody, next question will be for you. And this is one that is come up quite a lot. So we've talked a lot about what will happen in the classroom. There's also a lot of questions around how students will be staying distant during times when they're not in the classroom. So when they're going between periods, lunch, recess, or breaks, how will that work?
So our safety protocol does require that 6-foot distancing at all times on campus, which of course includes the passing periods, recess, and lunch. The site safety teams that I mentioned earlier will be working on implementing that requirement on the campus and may need to make modifications to the bell schedule in order to ensure that 6-foot distancing can be maintained during those periods. We have stated that the start and end time for each campus will not change, but it's important for the site team to really think about how to maximize the time and space on campus to ensure maximum spacing. In addition, the site safety teams will develop a schedule to stagger restroom breaks in order to ensure students and staff can maintain that 6-foot physical distancing at all times.
Thank you. And this question, depending on who you ask, people love that they've gotten out of school uniforms or they really want them back. So another question for in-person students. Once students return in person, will school uniforms be required? And if so, will they be required for distance learners too? So far this year, we have not required uniforms for distance learners, and we have not made a decision about the expectations for in-person learners in terms of uniforms. We will maintain the expectation for appropriate dress that has been outlined in our student handbook, but we need to weigh the benefits of a uniform against the possible added expense to families who are already dealing with so much. This decision will be made in collaboration with site leadership. Thank you. And with that, Nancy, we'll turn it back to you.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're going to get there together. So right now at the district level, our teams here at central office and in the various locations are responsible for the logistics, the operations, and the community communications. We are going to continue to work with the school sites to ensure that the district standard processes and procedures are being implemented, that we are complying with them, and we will support sites as needed. Right now, we only have employees at our work locations. The protocols appear to be working as planned. However, now that we are talking about returning students, it's important that we all have shared expectations around the implementation of those protocols, that we all comply, and that we support and work together to deploy either additional resources as far as people, time, or funds to locations that may need them as we prepare for the return of students in January. At the school level, as Assistant Superintendent Jody Lack shared, each school site has a safety team. We are going to make sure that that safety team is made up of a diverse set of stakeholders, and they're going to be responsible for vetting the procedures, making sure that everyone at the school site is implementing them, is trained, is complying, and that they are in constant communication with the central office team on a regular basis regarding everything that needs to be in place prior to bringing students onto campus. We feel that this partnership with our employee groups, with those that are at the school site, those of us that work here, that constant communication and making sure that everything is in place will add a lot of procedures and adherence and understanding of why things are in place to make sure that our employees are safe, that the students are feeling safe, and there's a comfort level that everybody has prior to this next transition, because our goal is to mitigate the risk factors. So with that, let me summarize what we've been through today. This really was a webinar that focused on high-level points. You will be hearing more from us over the course of the next few weeks as we get closer to that date. But first and foremost, want to say that Santa Clara County is in the orange tier. And if we are in orange or yellow on December 30th, which is the last time the dashboard will be updated prior to the opening on January 5th, if we continue to be in the orange tier, we will offer in-person instruction for some students. We will continue to work on preparing for that return of our campuses, and we will keep you updated as we make progress. We're going to continue to work with our labor groups. We're known across the state for having incredible working relationships with our labor groups. I've met with the labor groups last week. We talked about this January 5th date. They're excited to be part of these safety teams and have their members be part of the safety team so that we can together operationalize the procedures that are going to help us open the schools in January. So we also are going to have more regular community and employee updates so that you're all aware of our progress. We know that this is top of mind for our families and our students, and sharing with you where we are as we get closer to that date is going to be really, really important because families have decisions to make, schedules to arrange, and so we want to make sure that you have the most current information as we get closer to that date.
Great, thank you, Nancy. I think we have a little bit of time for a few more questions, so we'll do one more round before we conclude. The first question, Jody, is for you, and it's regarding a hybrid model, which we've gotten a lot of feedback on. So did we consider a hybrid model where classes are split in half and only go on alternate days?
The hybrid model would require students to be on their own for a portion of the week, completing tasks without the support of a teacher. The reopening task force did consider a hybrid model, but determined that that model did not meet the requirement for students to have access to their teacher throughout the school day every day. This model also negatively impacts our ability to maintain a stable cohort at the elementary level because the teacher would be in the classroom with different groups of students.
Great, thank you. Next question, Dominic, is for you. This one has been probably equally popular, which is what's coming up and what can we expect with high school sports? So if we continue to be in distance learning, can we still have sports in some form?
So currently the organization that oversees California Athletics, California Interscholastic Federation, is planning to hold 2 seasons, one starting in December and one starting in March. As the first day of practice approaches, we will stay in communication with our local leagues, Central Coast Section, and our Blossom Valley Athletic League to see if the seasons will continue to move forward. We are currently not holding conditioning camps to coincide with our decision to continue distance learning through December. We will revisit the conditioning camps as we get closer to the season.
And next question, Stephen, is for you. Is there an agreement with the teachers union? And if not, is one needed to reopen?
As the superintendent mentioned, we have a positive relationship with all 5 of our labor groups. We reached an agreement with the teachers for the first 6 weeks of distance learning through the end of that initial phase, and then we reached an agreement to extend that through December. We don't have an agreement for January yet, but we are on the same page that if the health conditions around us continue to be as they are now or better, we need to support our students, especially provide that in-person option for the students that most need it. I mean, we've talked about distance learning has been successful, but we need to do more. The health conditions have been a priority for us. If we continue to be in the orange or the yellow, we're confident we'll have an agreement with the teachers on how best to do that. So at this time, we agree on the most important piece, which is January is our next transition point. It's the start of the second semester. If the health conditions are better or equal to what they are today, students should be on campus. We'll work to finalize those details, but we're all on the same page that that is the goal, and we're also in agreement that if the health conditions around us worsen, we're going to need to revisit bringing students back onto campus.
Thank you. And Jody, our community is super supportive of our teachers. How are we supporting teachers to ensure that they're ready to teach a class with some students in person and some students at home?
We have created a plan and plan to continue providing additional professional development for our teachers and our staff in order to ensure that they have the training for managing a blended classroom. They need to be able to manage groups of students who are in the classroom as well as at home, and they need to be able to teach students how to comply with the safety protocols. We will continue to provide support for that. We will provide lessons that will help with that. But really the teachers need that, the support to be confident in this different type of teaching style. So that professional development will continue to be rolled out over the next 2 months. And additionally, our site staff continue to have access to instructional coaches who can provide additional professional development to differentiate the needs and meet the needs of the school staff. It's really important for us to remember that in-person lessons will be different than we have traditionally provided, and our staff will need continuing support in this instructional setting.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Stephen, we'll throw this one to you. Are there any options for soliciting community support on a school-by-school basis to help reduce risks of returning to class?
So we always appreciate the support of our parent groups and other community partners, but when it comes to the pandemic, we all know that we have to do it together. It doesn't help if only some people wear their mask or only some people socially distance. All of the safety protocols in San Jose Unified are for all students and all staff. So we want to make sure we adhere to those safety protocols across the entire district. San Jose Unified will make sure we have the PPE. San Jose Unified will make sure we have the outside air through our HVAC. We'll do all of those things in response to the pandemic. You should think of those responses like textbooks. We don't want parents to fundraise for textbooks. The basics of responding to the pandemic, San Jose Unified will provide for everyone. If parents want to help, one of the best ways is reinforcing the safety protocols. So a booster group shooting the best hand washing video ever and role modeling healthy practices for kindergartners. You know, our parent group saying, here's how often, you know, here's the best way to socially distance in this environment. There are lots of creative ways our parents can support adhering to the safety protocols. Again, to respond to a pandemic, we all need to do it, not school by school or parent group by parent group. Fundraising activities, the need for meals is really pervasive in San Jose. You can donate to our student nutrition program, which provide meals to anyone in our community under 18. You can support our local food banks. There's lots of need out there, and there's lots of ways for us to support that need as a community. But when it comes to the pandemic, we're going to make sure that we provide all of the responses to the safety protocol as a district altogether, not school by school or group by group.
Great, thank you. And with that, we are nearly out of time, so I will turn it back over to you, Nancy, to summarize for us.
So once again, I just want to close by reminding everyone what the key points are for this particular presentation. First and foremost, our intention of bringing some students back starting January 5th if we continue to remain in the orange or yellow tier. And again, that decision will be finalized December 30th, but we are continuing to prepare and have everything ready based on the assumption that we will continue to move in the right direction. The very next step is that there will be a selection process that will be communicated out to families in November. We ask that you please make your selection so that we can begin to determine how many in-person spots and how many distance learning spots are needed. We're going to continue to prepare our school sites and working collaboratively with all of our leaders and our departments to make sure that we're ready for that January return. And we're continuing to stay in close communication and collaboration with our labor groups to make sure that our employees are comfortable with the working conditions and that we are all clear on protocols and factors that are being put in place to mitigate any risk. And then we're going to have constant regular communications with the community and the employees so that people know what is coming and where we're going as we prepare for the return for students onto campus. So I also want to let you know that I'm sure we recognize there are questions that still remain unanswered, and we are committed to continuing to get answers to those questions when we have them. If you have additional questions after this webinar, please send those into the PIO@sjusd.org box, and we will use that information as we build our next set of communications and our processes. And then finally, I just want to thank everybody for taking time from their day to spend this live webinar with us. It will be recorded and posted on the website. Know that we are eager to see your students, the families, to have some semblance of our former normal, but understand that it will be under different circumstances. But until the day we can see everybody in person, thank you. We're going to continue to work hard, and please continue to read and engage with our communications. Thank you.